Welcome back to the Single Parents Network. I'm Nrgy, the Single Parents Coach, where I work with single fathers and single mothers who want to achieve a healthy co-parenting relationship. That includes us discussing topics such as effective communication, how to treat your now ex, or how to blend your families together. And we also talk about emotional control. And today we're going to be discussing finances. So I do have my guest here today, Brad. Please welcome him. And Brad, introduce yourself to our listeners and let us know a little bit about your experience and your relation to the topics that we will be discussing today.
All right. Yeah. My name is Brad Baldridge. I'm the founder and chief podcaster at Taming the High Cost of College. And I have a specialty where I help families plan and pay for college. I tend to work with families that, where the children are in high school, or at least some of them are in high school. And you're kind of, the rubber really meets the road, and that you've got to get it figured out in the next year or two or three. And, it's on, so to speak. And I do occasionally work with someone where we're doing some longer term planning where they have younger children. But, kind of the sweet spot is kids in high school, and how do you figure it all out?
Tell us, what should we know about college and finances? What's the first thing that we should jump into today?
Yeah, I guess, well, to start with, is college planning can be divided kind of into two categories, what I would call early stage planning and late stage planning. And I've already mentioned late stages, where I spend a lot of time. But so let's define what we're talking about there. So if you go to the early stage planning, that's, we've got a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, a kid in middle school, or, hey, we're pregnant, should we start planning for college? All of those would be early stage. In other words, you might set up some sort of savings plan. You might look forward to it, but you're not going to visit colleges with a 7-year-old, and you're not going to fill out financial aid forms for a long time and that type of stuff. Whereas late stage, you are at that stage now. So now you've got freshman, sophomore, junior in high school, and you are trying to figure it all out in more detail. And it doesn't matter how well you did when you did your early stage planning. I mean, you may come to it with it all figured out and lots of money, but you still have to do the late stage planning of, well, how do we pick the school and the major, and what is it going to take to get accepted, and should we invest this way or that way, or how should we, pay for this, and what about loans and scholarships, and how does it all fit together? And then how do we be fair among our kids and all that stuff? So you're going to have to do the late stage planning again, no matter what. And most people aren't rolling in with big piles of money saying, we got it all covered. Most of the time it's, well, how are we going to fill the gaps? And, some people have some money saved. Usually it's not enough, because nobody told us when we had kids 18 years ago how crazy expensive it was going to be. So again, most of us undershot the mark, and that's just the reality. So, that's the first step, right? Is to kind of figure out where we stand. Are we in early stage or late stage? And then once we start talking about late stage, well, what is that? Well, as I've mentioned, there's things that families do together. So you're going to visit schools together. You're going to work with your student and talk about scholarships and that type of thing. But then there's some things that ideally the student does by themselves. They're going to hopefully figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And again, a little coaching from mom and dad, but it really is their decision. And they've got to figure that out. They're going to potentially have to do the applications and the essays to get accepted to a college. They have to do the extracurriculars. They have to show up and take the test if that's part of your plan. So there's some, again, it's on the student. And then there's some things that kind of fall on the parent or parents, which would be, how are we going to pay for this? And what's a reasonable price to pay for school? And will we qualify for need-based aid and merit aid? And again, parents don't have to do that. Sometimes it's the student doing it, but it's based on parents' income and parents' assets. And the parents are very involved in the process. Generally, unless, again, the student is independent because they're, have lost their parents, or they're a runaway or something like that. But again, the typical 18-year-old rolling out of high school, it's a family project. Mom and dad are involved, the students involved, and you got to somehow work together and solve it and keep the peace all at the same time.
Definitely. What about for those who aren't sure that college is for them?
Right. Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit. So first of all, college for everyone, in my opinion, it's a soundbite that sounds good, but that's what it is. It's a soundbite. I think it's patently wrong. There's many people where college is not the right path. And what does college actually mean? Are you talking about going off and, living on a campus that you have to, you're off on your own, living on a campus in a dorm? Or are we talking about the local community college? That could be very different. And are we talking about, straight out of high school or someone going back to school when they're 25 or 30? So there's lots of different, there's a lot of nuance to it, and it can't be boiled down to a soundbite. And I guess that's the first thing, right? Is it's very complicated, and it's very specific to your family based on, academic ability of your children and your financial situation, and lots of pieces go into it. So that's, I guess, the first step is really understanding, less than half of college students right now are that student that's living on a campus in a dorm, or even living off campus, but attending school as that full-time rolling out of high school student. The other, more than half, are returning adults and other types of students that are also involved in college. And I think that's, and I think some of that is good, right? If you looked at a typical high school class, right, there's a bunch of academic superstars at the top that are going to do really well academically, no matter where they go and what they do. They're going to be fine. And then there's the kids on the other end of that spectrum, whatever you want to call them, that are going to struggle no matter what they do. And spending tons of money on college just to learn that college isn't right for you, may not be the best path, right? It might be the school of hard knocks. It might be, get out in the real world for a while. It might be just taking some courses at the local community college or whatever it might be. And I'm not saying you shouldn't get an education. Education is different than college, right? You can get an education a lot of ways. All the information that you learn in a college class is in that textbook. So you could read the textbook without going to the class and just learn it. But that's not reality for a typical 18-year-old, unfortunately. And I think that's the challenge, right? So that's kind of what we're up against. So that's kind of the first step is to, if you're undecided, well, then maybe you need to lay, plans where there's a couple forks in the road, and you say, well, if we go down this fork, this is the plan. If we go down that fork, that's the plan. But you can't necessarily just say, well, I have many parents say things like, well, my student can't figure out what major they want, so we can't pick a school, so we can't do any planning at all, which is, it's a bad excuse, right? And you can plan. A lot of students go to college undecided. It's the number one major, a lot of colleges like to say, is undecided. And lots of people change their major. Now, that's not ideal with the prices today. When I went to college, it wasn't unusual to run into somebody that's been there 5 years already, and they're saying, yeah, I changed my major 3 times, and I just changed it the 4th, and I still have 2 years to go because I keep changing my major. And college wasn't so expensive, so it didn't matter that much. You really don't want to do that today with today's prices, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes it just happens that way, and you're just going to have to roll with it. And that's the other thing around college planning is, especially early on when you're dealing with a sophomore, junior, they don't know what they want to be when they grow up, and they don't know what a big college looks like compared to a small college, and they don't have a lot of it figured out. At least some. I mean, there's other kids that, I'm going to be a nurse from the time they were 7. It was pretty clear that that's where they were going, or a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever it is, right? There's some kids that pick a path, get on it, stay on it, and are very successful on it, and they just go straight through. There's many that don't do that. They start with the cowboy and astronaut, and then they change it once a year, whether they need to or not. And just continually, it's always been a challenge. And then as they get closer, it's a challenge. So nothing wrong with undecided, but it's, for a lot of parents, especially parents that were very focused when they went to college, they say, well, just do it, pick one and let's focus on it and get it done. And that's easy to say. Parents that were undecided and struggled with it, they have a lot more leniency, so to speak, when they see it in their children. So again, take it with a grain of salt. And then, as I'm sure part of your coaching, you also have to realize kids are different, and what worked for one isn't going to work for the next. Starting with potty training all the way through college of, well, my oldest, we just did it and it was done, and now it's so hard. Well, that's life. That's not unusual.
Right.
And, kind of part of the process again. But the other thing you mentioned in there was kind of the timeline. When should we do this? And, do we have to get started or whatever? And it's important to realize for the timeline that the colleges set all the deadlines in the senior year of high school for the typical, transition from high school to college. You apply for college typically early in the fall of your senior year of high school. You also fill out financial aid forms in the fall. And then through the winter, you may get accepted, or you may get some initial scholarship offers, and you get some correspondence. And then you might get the official offer in March or April. And then by May 1st, you commit to the college that you want to attend, typically. And those are the deadlines now that are imposed by the college. I think families need to impose their own deadlines on themselves, because that's the reality, right? Is you need to be ready for the senior year, which means you need to do stuff in the junior year and perhaps the sophomore year, so that when you get to the senior year, you're not, again, I see a lot of families that are stressed out, hair on fire kind of families, we call them, where they've got so much to do and so little time to get it done. And students don't have time to reflect on what they like and don't like and all that type of stuff. So my recommendation is sophomore year, especially for the more mature families and more mature students, right? If they're ready to go visit some colleges, you can do that no pressure visit as a sophomore. I did that with 2 of my 3 kids. Again, it wasn't a good fit for all of them, so I didn't do it with all of them. But where it was a good fit, we did it. And why did we do it? It's like, well, let's just go look at the local college. We both have time. You have this Friday off. I can take this Friday off. It's, no pressure. Let's just go to the local college and check it out. And we'll stay as long as you want, and we'll go to a couple of the sessions, and we'll explore the majors and whatever. And when we've had enough, we'll call it a day. And that way they kind of get some exposure to start realizing, oh, I like a big school, because I've seen a couple of big schools, and I like the idea of being in that stadium with 50,000 of my closest friends cheering on the team. That sounds like college to me. Many people, however, would say, why do they keep dragging us into the stadiums? I don't care about football. I'm not going to go to a game. Why don't they take me where I want to go? And it's like, oh, well, there's your aha moment, right? Is instead of letting them show you what they want to show you, which is their shiny new stuff, you say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to be a biology major. Can we go to the biology labs? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Yes, we can. Let's go look at the biology labs. Or no, you can't go to the biology labs, because if we showed you the labs, you would never want to come here. Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know too. Whatever it might be, right? So as part of the process, working with the student. And then the same kind of discovery can be done on the parent side of it, which is, well, what is this really going to cost? Well, the average public school, $27,000. Average private school, $57,000. But that's average. Public schools range from 2022 up to 35,000 or so would have most of the public schools in there. But the average, or the privates, would range between 35,000 all the way up to 85,000. So some of the most expensive colleges are very expensive, and then that's the list price. That's tuition, room and board, books, fees, beer and pizza. The whole cost of the average student. And that's a published number. The government requires all the colleges to put that information out there. And, so again, that's average. But now from that, well, we don't actually pay that price. A lot of us get scholarships or merit aid or need-based aid or grants from the government or different pieces of the puzzle. So our net cost, it could be substantially different. And that's where a lot of people don't realize that, again, as an example, Stanford is 85,000-ish each year and going up. But they've also put out a press release and said that if your family earns less than $100,000, it will be free. In other words, the tuition will be zero, the room and board will be zero. So a lot of people, they say, no, we can't look at Stanford. I can't consider Stanford. It's way expensive. It's 85,000. And it's like, well, is it 85,000 for you? Probably not, but maybe. It really depends on how the system works. So for low income, they've got need-based aid. Some schools have merit aid for high academic achievers, but some schools, like a Harvard and a Stanford, they say, well, everybody here is a rock star, so we don't offer merit aid because everybody would deserve it or nobody deserves it. And they just chose nobody. So they don't offer merit aid, but they offer very generous need-based aid. And if you can get accepted at those schools, the price will be, reasonably in line based on your income. Now, if your family's high income, you may have to pay full price because there is no merit aid. And a rock star student that can accept it at these high-end schools, well, they could be the presidential scholar at an average school. Mm-hmm. And the presidential scholar at an average school, gets a full tuition scholarship, and all they pay is room and board. But you got to find the schools where you're that type of student, right? So you could choose to go to the school, the high-end school and pay full price, or you could choose to go to a different school, and pay $20,000. Or maybe there's a third school where they even include room and board. So some schools pay zero for school. Some students pay zero for school. Many students don't pay full price, but some do. And it depends on both the academic profile of the student, because that impacts how much merit aid you have. And the family financial profile is also part of it, where there's need-based aid for some families. And that can be pretty substantial. So some families will get both need and merit. Some families won't get anything at all. And some families will get one or the other. So the average net price of college is substantially lower than the numbers I just talked about, where the average free money at a state school is in the like 7,000 or 8,000, and the average free money at a private school is like 22,000 or 24,000. So on average, a lot of colleges are very affordable relative to the local state school. And I think that's where, again, a lot of families really need to understand, how does this all work? And what's the real cost going to be for us? Because you can't rely on the way it worked for your brother-in-law or your friends at work or whatever, unless they're very similar, as in the academics of their students is the same as the academics of your student. And their financial profile is the same as your financial profile. And everything lines up, which almost never happens. So I think a lot of people, need to just jump in there and figure it out for themselves.
Yes. Oh my goodness. A lot of information, a lot of things to consider and to think about. When you're working with these families, do you have like a typical structure or like a step-by-step type of guide that you provide to them, or that you just follow yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Right. So, and again, it falls into these different categories, right? Well, this is junior year process. This is senior year process. This is the financial aid process. And each of them kind of fit together, right? Sometimes based on the financial aid process, we might come to the conclusion that these are the types of schools that are going to be a good fit. So let's go look at those schools and see if they're a good fit from the opinion of the student, right? As my daughter, when we did those local visits, she said, I don't like these schools. Why? They're too close to home. I was like, okay, well, what about this school that looks kind of like this, but it's in Houston? Now, is it okay? Oh, yeah, I like the school other than the fact that it's too close to home. Okay, well, that's good to know, right? And, then it's my job to kind of do the financial side of, well, that type of school, would come in at a reasonable price or wouldn't come in at a reasonable price. And that's the challenge for a lot of families is working through that. So, we have software that when we're working with families that helps us estimate the costs, based on, real numbers, not just the list price. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where for a lot of families, even working with sometimes your financial advisors of various sorts, where they don't understand the intricacies of, well, wait a minute, if you can get need-based aid or merit aid, why are we modeling a school that's going to cost $60,000 when schools for us are going to be more like $30,000, or the other way around? Why are we using 30 if we're looking at a very expensive private and we're going to pay a lot more? And I think that's a big challenge around, how the process works. And of course, there's a lot of free resources on my website that help with that. So we have the scholarship guide for busy parents that talks about how scholarships work. And again, it's targeted. It's not going to teach you everything you need to know. It's going to teach you enough and very quickly so that you can decide, should I pursue scholarships or not? It's, it's not going to teach you how to pursue them and do all but it's, a couple of quick videos, 10, I think there's 4 10-minute videos or so in the program. And again, you can get up to speed quickly on scholarships, decide what works and what doesn't. And then from there, decide if you're going to jump into it with both feet and work hard at it or not. We've got an EFC calculator or an SAI calculator to help you figure out financial aid. And there's, cost of colleges by state. So you can download a chart with, most of the major colleges in your state all in one place with some, not only the top line total cost numbers, but some net prices based on income. So you can look up, well, based on incomes between, 75 and 100,000, here's what the prices were, net after aid and a lot of times those numbers are pretty competitive with each other. And so that's, again, part of the process. So yes, we do have a lot of resources that are available for if you just want to do it yourself. And of course, we help families through it as well with either one-on-one planning, or we also offer some courses and other paid courses and other free resources as well.
Awesome. Okay, so since this channel is mostly geared towards single parents, how are you able to help those families determine when those parents are either separated or going through a divorce, who pays for what when it comes to the child's college education?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So now we're getting into what I would call the list of things that make college a little more complicated. So divorced and blended families means you've got to do everything everybody else does, plus understand, how are we going to, as separated or divorced parents, who's going to pay how much and who's going to be on the financial aid and who's going to be in charge of the visits and so there's a little more extra work to do on top of what everybody else has to do. If you owned a business, there's opportunities where you could set up tuition reimbursement plans and do stuff in a business that other people couldn't do. So if you have an athlete that might get athletic scholarships, or if you have an athlete that is likely to participate in athletics but not get scholarships and might go to a D3 school, they have their pros and cons that you need to understand. If you have an inheritance, that can drastically change the numbers very quickly, and all of a sudden you got to rethink how you do stuff. So there's lots of those things. So divorce being the one that's relevant here. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there's a couple different things that happen when in a divorce situation. So one of the big ones is financial aid. So need-based aid is based on the income and assets of the parent or parents, depending on what we're talking about, and the income and assets of the student. Now, the typical student rolling out of high school and going to college, their income and assets are zero. They have not had a working career. They've not saved a lot of money. Maybe they got a little bit in their savings account or whatever it might be, but generally they don't have a lot. So we can kind of ignore what they have. So it really is based on income and assets of the parent. Well, with the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, that's where they gather the information to calculate how much aid you're going to receive. And in a divorced or separated situation, typically only one parent is going to be listed on that form. So now which parent is changing, so starting this fall, so families that have students that are graduating and starting college in 2024, so there'd be a rising senior, they are the first ones under the new system. So they are quite literally the guinea pigs of, we're not exactly sure how all this is going to work out because they haven't finished writing the software and releasing it all. But it will be different than what it was, up until this time. So that would be an important point. So anybody out there that already has kids in college, or it's like, well, I had kids, I've done this before. Okay, well, what you learned before may have changed a little bit or a lot. And divorce is one of the areas where it's changed a lot. So who the parent is changing. They're trying to make it align closer to the taxes and how taxes work. So they want the parent to, but I think that's going to be a broken system. I don't think it's going to work out as well as they had hoped. But the goal is that if the student's claimed on your taxes, you're going to be the one on the taxes, but that isn't always the case based on the way tax rules work. Another important thing is child support used to be considered income, but now it's considered an asset. So that could drastically change how much aid you receive, because the bigger the child support is, the bigger difference it's going to make going forward, because assets aren't, so 60,000 in income reduces your aid by a lot more than 60,000 of assets. And because of that switch, some families that had child support may not have qualified for aid in the past that will qualify now. And there's other benefits as well. So one of the big pieces of the puzzle is who should, not is planning ahead. And instead of saying who has to be on the FAFSA, it's, well, who do we want to be on the FAFSA? And then let's do what we need to do so that that's the right person on the FAFSA. So in the past, it was where the student lived the most in the previous 12 months. Now it's whoever provided the most support. So if we want a particular parent on the form, well, then we should do what it takes to make that parent be on the form and kind of work through there. So there's an opportunity there for some planning. But we have to understand how it works. So an extra layer of complexity that other families may not have to deal with, where, either a single parent or still married parents where there's only one choice, then there is no efforts there. Another area that I think comes up a lot is whether or not parents are cooperating or not. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure your coaching, it comes into it a lot, right? And, have you ever heard this, right? Where parents have been divorced for a while and they say something along the lines of, one parent says, well, the other parent earns so much more money, they can afford to pay for college. They should pay for it. And then that higher earning parent says, well, I've paid all this money in child support. Where did all that money go? How come some of that wasn't saved for college? And they're both right and they're both wrong, right? I mean, the reality is, when there's divorce and separation, because you're going from one household to two, there's more expenses than there used to be. And it's just hard. And then when you start adding blended families, and then it gets even more complicated, because when there's a remarriage, the appropriate parent, and if they're remarried, their new spouse is also included on the FAFSA. Mm. So a lot of times we'll have parents that say, we're thinking about getting married, and the reality is that has a big impact. Maybe it's positive, maybe it's negative on how financial aid may work. Again, because sometimes if two parents with kids in college at the same time get married, then it might change the numbers to the positive. Whereas sometimes if your joint income is higher, it might change it to the negative. So sometimes, again, as much as it's not a great from a philosophical standpoint, it's not great, but from a dollars and cents standpoint, getting married could cost you, and therefore sometimes they choose to delay it. Yes. Because the cost is too high. And that's unfortunately the reality. And, so I think that's another piece of the puzzle that, and then there's sometimes that I'm working with a parent who is what I call holding the college bag. In other words, sometimes one parent is just out of the picture and not willing to contribute, not able to contribute. Nobody even knows where they are, perhaps. But so there's one parent that feels like, well, if the only way college is going to happen is if I take it over and do it myself.
Yep.
And it would be great if I got support, financial support from my ex or the other parent, but it's just not likely, or maybe not as much support, right? But there's those challenges where, again, sometimes, like I said, sometimes there's this parent that just says, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to be me or not. And that's, so sometimes we can make lemon out of lemonades, though, and where at least it works out better because of the divorce. Now, again, I occasionally have married families say something like, well, we should just get divorced. That'll help us pay for college. The pain and agony of divorce and the loss of income, et cetera, it never would work out to be a net positive. But if you're going through the pain and agony of divorce anyway, then you may as well take advantage of it when it comes to college. But I don't think it's a planning strategy. Just like there's rules out there, something very similar, which is, students that are married don't have to report mom and dad's income, and students that have dependents of their own don't have to report mom and dad's income. And if that's true, well, by all means, take advantage of it. But most people aren't going to say, well, why don't you just go have a baby? That's how we'll pay for college. It'll make it turn out better. Or why don't you get married? It's like, no, that's not a planning strategy. If that situation exists, take advantage of it. But, and so that's where divorce falls into it. And it's not really a planning strategy, but if it exists, well, then take advantage of it. And do what you can to make lemonade out of the lemons that, of that situation.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Although I laughed when you said the situation or the scenario for those who may say, well, you know what, we might as well let's just get divorced for the sake of the finances for college. I wish that I could say that those thoughts don't actually come out of people's mouths, because you'd be surprised. Yes. And it's like, no, like long term, look, this is not great for the long-term gain.
Yes, exactly.
And so all of these changes that are going on, so this is new to me. The changes that you were saying are taking place for the first time, but coming up. Is there a way for parents to prepare, or is it just kind of like when they start the process and, speaking with maybe their child's high school counselors or advisors maybe, and then talking to maybe those college recruiters or whatever, is that their best way for them to learn about these new changes and rules?
Yeah. So, some of the information is out there. When you get into the weeds around divorce and some of that stuff, well, what happens if it's your second divorce and all this, well, that situation doesn't happen very often, and they haven't written the rules that would apply to that very unusual situation. But the basics are already out there. So as an example, on my website, we've got a financial aid calculator, SAI calculator, but student aid index is the new terminology for that. That calculator is updated with all the new rules. So if you go ahead and put it in there, it should give you reasonably accurate results. Now, but I don't, and the fact that the rules are changing, the colleges are well aware of it. Mm-hmm. And most school counselors at least have started to hear about it, but it just hasn't gotten out there to the general population. And I think the one big thing that's, a challenge this coming year is they've already told us that they're not going to have the FAFSA done on time. So instead of normally they launch it October 1st. This year it's delayed till at least December.
Mm.
And they haven't even given us a date in December. And hopefully they'll stick to the December date, whatever it might be. But in the past, things have slipped beyond that even. But so the colleges, are going to have to do things a little quicker and figure out how to recover because of the later information that's available to them. And and parents are just going to have to be a little more patient because it's going to be new to everybody. But I think we'll get through it. It's not, it's just going to be like everything else, like COVID. When we got through it, and there was things that we had that were frustrating, and it's kind of the same thing here. There'll be things that are frustrating. We'll get through it. It'll get a little better the next year and better after that, and it'll be back to normal, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I know there were a lot of, when you were talking about how this year FAFSA is going to be delayed, I know last year, well, when I say last year, spring of 2023, they were delayed as well then with getting responses out to the families who were renewing their applications for financial aid and waiting on seeing what they were awarded and seeing what those decisions were. And I know a lot of the parents that I've just, was in contact with, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, what are we going to do? Because they were running into deadlines. They were running up, into needing to register, what classes could their child register for. And once they started, kind of going through that process of clicking and adding to the cart, so to speak, it's like, wow, okay, we need financial aid to kick in, but FAFSA is not updating or anything like that. So yeah, they've been having some sort of delay for a while now. And to hear that it's going to continue, that's a little, that's unfortunate.
Yes, exactly. And again, what it boils down to is, you do what you can control, like get your stuff going as early as you reasonably can. And then, we saw a lot of this with COVID too. Through the COVID process, colleges had to, were struggling with things like, most students weren't able to take a test for a year or two. So a lot of colleges said, we're just going to have to accept students without tests because we have no other choice. Nobody can take a test during COVID. They're all canceled. And so what's come out of that, though, is not, some of the colleges said, we made testing optional and we kind of like it. We're going to keep it. So things have changed again around testing because of, they tried it during COVID, just like work from home. A lot of workers tried work from home and they decided they like it and they're going to try and keep it. Now, some employers are saying we don't like it and we want them to come back, and where that's going to go in the long run, who knows? But in the end, it's kind of the same stuff around college of, we've invented some of this online learning as an example. And now some students figured out that it doesn't work for them and they need it in person. And other students say, online is better. And I think that's all the process. And, that's part of the bigger picture again of, what's right for you? Do you want to be on that campus and, doing things in person, or is online a good alternative for you? And, part of the bigger picture there as well. And what really is the next step is, now that you know what you're up against, it's time to get out there and get started, especially if you've got kids in high school. And if you don't have kids in high school, just, remember that I told you to get started freshman, sophomore year, not junior, senior year like we used to do in the past. Again, 20 years ago when parents were going to college, or 30 years ago when parents were going to college, it wasn't unusual that most of the college process happened very late junior year and maybe even senior year. Mm-hmm. But it was also a time when a lot of us took the test once and we were done. A lot of us applied to 2 schools and then picked one, and we didn't really visit anything. We just picked college and off we went. And then later learned that, we could have done it better. Now the process is more expensive, it's more complicated, and we're trying to do it better by spending more time and effort up front instead of dealing with the consequences of a poor plan later. And again, we talked about that, those students that changed their major 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an extra year or 2 of college. Well, again, that wasn't so bad when college, but I saw some old paperwork from when my mom dug it out of the basement, and it had my old ACT stuff in there. And one of the colleges listed their tuition at $1,200 a year.
No way.
So that's making me feel old, I guess. And the private school that I was looking at was $5,400.
Wow.
Right. And both of those are almost 10 times as much now. It's
Right.
12,000 at that school and more like 50,000.
Wow.
So, again, so the game has changed. So parents that, if you've been out of the game for 20 or 30 years, it's quite a bit different now than what it was.
Most definitely. Oh my goodness. You ought to frame that. I wouldn't get rid of it if I were you.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I've been trying to keep it safe. So
yeah,
pre-internet and that kind of stuff. So it was the old reports where they literally printed stuff, and
Oh my gosh, I'm glad that you shared that. That's because that just brings things into perspective, especially like we were saying at the very beginning, how college isn't necessarily for everyone, and if it's not, it's best to make that decision and be confident in that decision and not waste time, waste money, waste your energy, whatever. So yeah, because college does not have to be the next step. Sure, for some people, for some career paths, it is it's required, for some, but for others, consider the alternatives. Consider what, with the world that we're living in today, like you were saying, post-pandemic now, there's so many opportunities out there for a lot of positions and for a lot of paths that students may want to go down. So I will just add also, just listen to your child whenever you're having these conversations as a parent. Listen to your child, help them to figure out who they are, help them to learn themselves, help them to figure out, what are they passionate about? What are those things that they really can see themselves do? Or also pay attention as the parent, pay attention to what you notice your child is great at. What are they skilled in? What are those talents that you see come easy or come natural for your child? Because somewhere in there is where the answer lies for, what they may be doing in the next 10, 20, 30 years or so. So definitely pay attention to the skills and the personality of your child as well. That will help determine when you are faced with needing to decide, okay, do they go to college or option B, C, and D? Take it one step at a time and connect with someone like Brad, connect with your high school advisor or counselor, as well as the college that your child may be considering. Connect with all of these resources and all of these people who are in position to be able to walk with you along the journey here, because you do not have to do it by yourself. And just from some of the conversations that I've had with parents, a lot of the ones who kind of go through more of a stressful period when it comes to this topic, it's because they're trying to do it by themselves. And that's a mistake, so connect to your resources that are out here and that are available to you. I am going to have Brad share his website and his guide, as well as anything else in just a few minutes. But before we get to that part, I want us to go ahead and switch to what I call the fun segment. So, Brad, we've been talking about money and finances and FAFSA and financial aid calculators, all of that kind of stuff. But these next few questions, we're going to go outside of the box. First question, and I want you to have fun with it. My first question for you is to tell us, what is your biggest pet peeve?
I think one of them is for sure is when you're part of a crowd or whatever it might be, when maybe you're at a conference or whatever, and it's open for questions, right? and somebody asks a question and then somebody gives an answer, and then it's like they're talking about two different things, right? It's like, well, you hear the question and then you hear the answer. You go, wait a minute, you're not answering their question. And sometimes, it's communication, right? It truly is. They just are not clicking. But then you get the politicians, right? But, oh, I'm glad you asked that question, and I'm going to give you an answer that has nothing to do with the question.
Nothing.
That's my pet peeve right there. I mean, both of them bother me, but when the politicians do it on purpose of, what do you think about this? Well, I'm glad you asked about this. Let me talk about that. Okay, well, okay. Why don't you talk about this? That's what the question was. Why are you avoiding the question? That's one of my pet peeves.
That is a good one. I like it. All right. Question number 2. Describe yourself in one word.
Wow. Usually you get 4 or 5. I guess planner is, I like to plan. I like to, get in the weeds on good or bad.
Okay.
Adventurous.
Okay. So that leads me to, I'm going to ask you a third question. Give us one fun fact about you.
I like the ballroom dance.
Nice.
That's really fun. Fun for me anyway.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, that's so cool. Have you ever done any sort of professional type of or amateur type of dancing anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, many years ago when I was young and foolish, you get kind of pushed into doing what's called pro-am, which is, you dance with a professional instructor. And then the other person of the couple is an amateur dancer. And then you get involved in competitions, and it's fun, but it's also very expensive because a lot of times you're paying the professional to do that with you.
Oh, really?
And to practice with you and so forth and so on. So it's a combination of fun and a moneymaker for the pro.
Yes. So is it kind of like Dancing with the Stars? Is it kind
exactly
of like
right? And all those professionals on that show are being paid well. In that situation, they may be paid by the TV producers or whatever, right? Not necessarily the people that they're dancing with, but and again, I don't know how we got into this subject, but the dance community, that there are very much some pay to play kind of things where you can go to this competition and some go to Florida or go to Vegas or something and be part of this competition and have a good weekend or have a long and enjoy it. But the professional that's going, you paid them to teach you how to dance, and you paid them to practice a lot so that you're prepared for the show. And so they like it because you have to dance a lot and pay them, and then they'll show up and help you on the day of the competition. You probably don't pay them that day, but
yeah,
but there's also some good things too, because it forces you have a deadline. So, I got to learn this routine and be good at it by this time. And you take it seriously and you work hard. And then again, a lot of times it turns out well, and you're very proud of the accomplishments as well. So it's not all bad.
Okay. Final question. What's your theme song? What is that song that comes on and you're like, oh yeah, this is my jam? Like, this is your theme song?
Oh, I don't know. Journey. Some of the popular Journey songs, popular back in my day, right? Makes me feel real old. My kids are like, who's this and why do we care again?
No.
But, and then Queen, right? So all the Queen songs, We Are the Champion and Bohemian Rhapsody. And
nice. Thank you so much for playing along and entertaining us during that fun segment. We just wanted a moment to get to know you a little bit outside of today's topic. So we're going to go back to today's topic, and I want to give you the opportunity to share one final takeaway. So if there's something that we didn't get to today, or maybe a golden nugget, anything that you feel that our listeners should know before they sign off, please share that right now.
Right. Well, I think Nike had it right with just do it. I mean, the reality is if you go to any college campus, they're full of students. So most people figure it out. And again, it's a little bit of a challenge a lot through the process, but most people come out the other side and, and they're still happy and breathing, and it turns out okay. And, so I don't want to make it seem like it's onerous and impossible. It's just, it's just going to take some time and that type of stuff. And then, so just do it, start early, do what you can. Most of the time it turns out reasonably well for most people. And, but there's always one of those things, right? You can always do it a little better if you work at it. And, that's, I think, the challenge.
Absolutely. Just do it. Let's do it. And Brad, again, we definitely want to thank you for all of the information that you have shared. And I want to give you the opportunity to let us know, how can we support you? How can we follow you and find you in order to connect with you, as well as take advantage of the resources that you do have available? So let us know if you have any books or courses, anything on your website. This is the time to share all of that information.
Right. So everything is at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. I also have a podcast by that name. So wherever you're getting your podcast, I've got about 150 episodes of, all the stuff around college and all the stuff that's tangential to it, from testing and all the different pieces, testing and how to choose a major and what your students need to do, and various professionals that can help you and your student and various things, and all that's available there. But then on the website, you can sign up for my free newsletter, where we kind of keep you up to date and send you information, because I think that's the other piece of it, right? Is this is going to be a process where you're not going to sit down one Sunday afternoon and hammer it out. You're going to do little pieces here and there, and maybe a couple Sunday afternoons, and then you'll go visit some colleges, or you'll do some things, and then you'll have to come back to the drawing board and kind of take the next steps. And it's going to be a process that you do multiple times for multiple kids over many years. So again, there's a lot of good resources. The cost of college is by state, so you can go find a chart for your state that'll give you the list prices and the net prices on average. And again, so it's a place to start. So if you're just getting started and you want to see some numbers to kind of think about and plan with, that you can use that. There's also a college money report available on my website, where you can input your statistics, your financial information, your academic information, and a couple of the colleges that you're interested in, and that will calculate some net prices more specific to your situation. There's also the financial aid calculator there, where you can look things up. So yeah, I think those are the kind of the bigger resources: newsletter, podcast. And then if you just want to reach out and contact me directly, there's a phone number right on the website, or there's a couple of places where you can schedule a Zoom appointment if that's appropriate. So you can just reach out directly, and I'm happy to chat with someone and kind of meet them where they are and figure out what the next step should be.
Wonderful. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you again so much for just being willing to share your time with us. I'm losing my voice. Sorry. To share your time with us. And everyone, make sure that you support, for all my single parents that are out there, even if you're not a single parent, but if you have a child that is coming of age, of going into the college years. So if they're in high school, now is the time to start your preparation. Now is the time to start your research. Do not wait until the last minute. Do not wait until the last minute. So once again, thank you again, Brad. That's it for this episode, everyone. Make sure you go support Brad and reach out if you do have any questions or any concerns about anything. He shared a lot of information here today. So no need to sit back and try to Google everything on your own. Go to the experts. Go to the people who know of everything that's going on. They are up to date with all of the changes, especially those changes that Brad mentioned today. So reach out to Brad. And for anyone else who would like to be a guest on this podcast, you know how to reach me. Go to my website, thesingleparentsnetwork.com. Also, Be sure that you share this episode, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you have not subscribed to this channel already. And again, share this to someone if you know that they have a child who is also within this high school-ish age range. But that is it for this episode, everyone. Just always remember that when you master your mind, when you master your emotions, and when you master your assignment, you can live your purpose and live on purpose. Until next time, Coach Enrgy. Goodbye.